Okay, good morning. Today we're going to be glazing a pre-made bisque bowl for Empty Bowls, and this will be for Empty Bowls 21 in Midland, Texas on January 30th from 11 to 2. And so the first thing I've got is I've got my bowl, and my bowl's upside down. And I want to make sure that my hands are very, very clean because I don't want to get any kind of dirt or debris or anything else on the bowl before I start to glaze it. And what I'm going to do in this first video is I'm going to label the bowl, and personal preference here, but it tends to be that dots are a lot easier to apply for this kind of a labeling than trying to paint in the beginning. So what I like to do is kind of do a dot pattern there so you can see hopefully that there's an E that's shown up, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a little B, and because I want to break it up a little bit, I'm going to use a little bit of orange to do the 20. And so this is the 21st year that we've done Empty Bowls in the Permian Basin, and that's very exciting. Now I'm going to set all this to the side, and I'm going to take my wax because we have to make sure that there's part of the bottom of the foot of the bowl that is actually waxed so that it doesn't stick to the shelf when we fire it. Now, sometimes for those of you who have worked with greenware before in this way, you'll glaze the whole bottom and you'll put it up on spikes while it's being fired, and we don't have a lot of those spikes. So what we do is we will wax this part of the bowl and then wax a little bit of the side of the bowl, and then go ahead and start our glazing operation in the next video. So I want to let that glaze dry a little bit, and I'm just going to paint that wax on the surface. And it's going to take a little while for that wax to freeze or dry, if you will, on the bottom of the bowl. So this is not something that you want to get into with a lot of kind of a hurried attitude. And you want to be real careful with the bowl too, because if you drip the wax on the bowl, you won't be able to clean it off. It's going to be there. And then it sets up kind of an aesthetic challenge for finishing the bowl if you have some very distinct attitudes about how you want to decorate. So I'm just going to roll that brush around the bottom with the wax and get a kind of a consistent line. If my wax is runny, I want to use the wax in this orientation where the bowl is vertical and the brush kind of maintains a certain verticality to it also. I want to try and get as much of that raw white clay glazed as possible. Okay, so that's done. And you can see where it's still liquid there, hopefully. And so we'll take maybe 3 or 4 minutes just to let that sit and dry on the surface. So wax is starting to set. It's still, you can still see it's a little shiny here. Your preference would be to wait until it's totally dry, but it's fine as long as you don't get your fingers in it. So now I'm going to start to glaze the bowl, and I'm not going to bore you by sitting here making you watch me glaze the whole bowl. But I've got kind of a thick brush. It's a Japanese sumi brush. It's got a big bristle on it. It'll carry a lot of material. And what I'm after is 3 coats, and I want to get the bowl both inside and outside covered with 3 coats of glaze. And what I want to do is I want to find a place where I'm comfortable moving the bowl so that I'm not painting. You know, like when we're using regular house paint, sometimes we kind of slap the brush back and forth, and we do not want to do that with glaze because you can actually remove the glaze while you're glazing. And so I want to go around the bowl with with coats. And so you can see this is about 7 or 8 coats in that this part of it has actually started to dry. And this is primarily a technique we use with the commercial glazes. So now I can come back in and do my second coat, right? And in that second coat, I'm getting a good coverage. And really what I'm doing is trying to build up a really, really good, what I would call utilitarian surface, because we want to be able to eat and drink out of these bowls. And so you'll notice that on the second coat, you can see there where the first coat was, and I intentionally did not cover that so you could see the difference. And then to the second coat, it's going to take a little while longer for the second coat to dry. And when that second coat starts to dry, then, and you can see it's there, and you can do things like fan it a little bit, but it's part dry, part absorption into the clay. Then when that's no longer shiny, and you can see how that sheen's starting to go away there, then you can put that third coat on. Okay, and we you know, kind of the directions for the use of glazes like this, especially ones that have been engineered, are you really kind of want 3 coats to get a good coverage. Okay, so we are now starting to decorate our bowl. And so I remember I've got my 3 coats, my base coats, and now I'm actually putting my color and decoration on the piece. And so I'm just going to go through with my color, and I'm not so much worried about cleaning my brush in between, you know, so I'll let the blue and the orange, because I'm going to use all of it mixed together. And sometimes you can get kind of an interesting, what's called tertiary color between the two, and in this case you're not quite sure what it's going to be when it comes out of the kiln, but sometimes it can be fascinating and sometimes not. And so if I want to get a purer color that I'm using, I can just wipe the brush off. I don't need to go clean it. But hashes, little marks on the side of the bowl, and what I'm doing is just trying to fill up some of that space in there, but I don't want to fill it all up. I think one of the mistakes that people make when they're decorating is to try and put color all over the piece, and so you're kind of marrying color and form and content as you're working. And so you can kind of see what I'm doing there, and I'll work it. I think sometimes you start off and you're not really quite sure where you're going with a piece, and as you evolve, it's about patience and time and things like depth and complexity. And you know, the wonderful thing about working with ceramics is that sometimes, you know, you might make a couple of mistakes, and then you got to figure out what to do with the mistake. And sometimes the mistake yields what's called a happy accident. And sometimes those happy accidents become something we call art. So anyway, have fun.